welcome to the show. I'm Joseph Bonner, and today we have with us a very special guest to speak with us on the issue of mental health as it relates to our youth. Unfortunately, today we are seeing a rise in mental health crises amongst our young people, and we are definitely looking for some insight and suggestions on how to not only identify mental health when our children are having crises, but also what are the resources available to them that we as parents can utilize or we as their guardians. With that, we'd like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Washington. She is the CEO of ATW Health Solutions, and she is here as our mental health expert. Welcome to the show today. How are you?
I am awesome today. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are super excited to have you on, and I hate to cover these topics, not because they're not important, but just because, we have so much negativity in the world and we're all struggling, but I think it's really important to sometimes pause and stop and reflect on our young children and not only what struggles they're facing, but also how we can better support them and help them. So I guess my first big question to you is, how big of a problem is mental health amongst young people today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And let me start with a lot of what we've heard of recent, has been implications that because of COVID or as a result of COVID, we're beginning to see a lot of more of the mental health or actions that we know are caused by, mental health concerns. And the reality of it is that it's been a growing concern, actually, as a researcher. It's been a growing concern with our youth population, in particular between the ages of 10 and 24. Since around about 2018 is where we first started to see major surges or changes in the data. But even prior to 2018, depending upon what statistics you're looking at, most say nearly about 60% increase within just that one age group. And this was all prior to COVID. So COVID, hit us in the late 2019 going into 2020. But we've been actually seeing this phenomenon building for a number of years.
I 100% agree with you, and this is as a former educator working with the school districts. I was with the school district for about a decade. And, the longer I was there and the different demographics I worked with, you saw a rise and a spike in mental health crisis amongst our young people. I mean, in my last few years with the school district, we had to abate school shootings and, all drug, conglomerate, type things. And it was just like, I'm like, I don't remember. I mean, I know it was an issue, but like this major, it's just becoming something, unfortunately, that has impacted our young people. And so it's nice to have conversations about what we as adults can do to kind of, curb this and support our young people better as they face the same difficulties we're facing as adults. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And what I feel is also, just to kind of add just some context to just working in the educational system, it is definitely one of those jobs where it does require a lot of love and self-sacrifice. And like you said, when you're dealing with, thousands of children all facing their own, 1,000 different situations as educators, you have to be prepared to show love and kindness while dealing with your own mental health struggles. And so you're dealing with, I think, and so when you factor all that into the equation, it's no wonder the world is not more crazier than it is already. So I do have another question for you. So what signs can we as adults and guardians, parents look for to identify if our child is struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, so again, from a researcher standpoint, we like to look at things from a risk factor standpoint and a protective factor standpoint. And both have influences on one's mental health. And so I think the first obvious one is changes in behavior, right? So if you have, a young child who is fairly talkative or has a lot of energy, but for whatever, circumstances, might seem a little bit more reserved. Those are, some of the obvious beginning signs, changes in appetite. Another warning sign is, kids oftentimes, will send us signals that don't necessarily come out audible. But when you have a child that is showing reservations about interacting with certain groups, interacting with certain family members, things of that nature. Those are things that should spark a little bit of an alarm in terms of, wanting to have more of a conversation about why and what's going on. I noticed this, etc. So again, it's those shifts that we see. And in some of the even day-to-day activities. So, where you might have a person who was, very focused in school and loved school, but all of a sudden, has some reservations about math, right? And you're not really understanding, what's going on. Again, those are the types of signs that you want to kind of take a little step back and say, this might not just be a hard class that this kid is, involved with. There might be a little bit more, and it involves, first step, having a conversation or starting some type of conversation so that we can learn more.
Absolutely. So extreme behaviors in any direction that is out of the norm for our child and for our youth that we are watching over. And I think as parents, we just have to be diligent, look for these various signs, recognize it. If it doesn't go away like in a day or two, then the chances are you want to have a little sit down conversation. Absolutely. And make sure that you're present to help that child manage. And I guess that goes to my next question. How can we, as the parents and adults in their life, help them to cope with these challenges that they are facing? We know that sometimes it is a conversation, but sometimes it requires more than that.
Yep.
Can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, so going back to my point about, risk factors and protective factors. So we can't always protect our children from everything, right? So what I like to do is focus on really reinforcing those protective factors. And protective factors really are characteristics that help youth or young children adapt to different levels of hardship, whether any type of change, but levels of hardship. And so one example is scheduling kid dates or kid play dates. When I think about us as adults and, how many of us manage our relationships, we schedule dates with our significant other, right? We schedule dates with our spouse. And kids are no different. And kids are absolutely no different. They require that time. And so scheduling that type of time, what it does is it reinforces the family supportive relationships or supportive relationships of people that are close to you. It shows that level of commitment that goes above and beyond coming home at 3 o'clock after school and just being in the same zone or space together. But we're going to make a concerted effort weekly on Wednesday. That was date night for me, but Wednesday, right? And on Wednesday, we're going to, that's when we go to get our hair done together. Or that's when we go to the park and, and plays baseball or whatever those activities we do, concert, whatever those things might be. So one of the first things is I would say is, the same way we're committed about our adult relationships, we have to also be as equally committed to our kid relationships. So kid dates, kid play dates. The other is to, present opportunities for kids to really explore spiritual and religious activities. So spiritual structure, religious activity, just to explore those opportunities. And that doesn't always necessarily mean in the way in which you may have been taught about exploration of a spiritual but meditation. Right? Spending time, actually, showing your child or spending time with your child, demonstrating how to meditate, right? And tap into that spiritual self. Things like the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, local engagement or community activities. Like, I come from the generation, my mother, we had to join something, and Girl Scouts was our thing, right? And we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, to be quite honest with you. But again, as a researcher, we know that these community and social support activities are really key in terms of being able to provide protective support, or those protective factors that I talk about for kids. So the other thing that I would also add is promoting strong self-esteem or positive self-esteem. And so, however that translates, for you, but teaching them how to do things like, I remember my grandmother would take out time to teach us how to cook, So when she was cooking, it was our cooking class, right? It was our opportunity to actually cook with her. And so training kids or teaching them how to do specific things, whether it's guitar lessons, whether it's cooking lessons, singing lessons, you name it. But all of these, the different types of activities that I've described, all of these reinforce or support what's called protective factors. And protective factors are known to protect kids from the risk of trauma. So.
Makes sense. No, absolutely makes sense. And I can think of 1,001 scenarios in which these situations play out in my family, and it really does helps our children to feel loved, feel safe. They know that they have the support that they need at any given time. So I really appreciate all your advice. Very sound, very practical, and definitely something that parents and of course the adults in these children's lives can utilize to better support them. So thank you so much for taking some time to be with us on the air today and giving us some insight on not only the mental health crisis amongst our youth, but how we as parents and adults can help our children to cope. We really appreciate it, Dr. Washington.
Absolutely.